The Spot Track Podcast, talking sports contracts, the salary cap, and business of sports.
Welcome to the SpotTrack.com podcast. I'm Kevin Sylvester along with Paul Peck. We're from BuffaloSportsPage.com, and the founder of SpotTrack.com, Mike Giannetti, is on his own namesake's podcast, oddly enough. It is the start of the NBA season, so we are going to talk basketball for a change at the start here, Mike, instead of football and quarterbacks and money.
We'll get there.
That may show up in the show here, but the NBA start of the season, tons of money in the NBA, and you brought a special guest in today, too.
Yeah, we're bringing on the co-founder, Scott Allen, who dives onto the NBA side of Spot Track almost exclusively now. So he's the nerd with the NBA stuff, which is pretty crazy. It's the money's big. There's a lot of intricacies with the NBA cap, and we're going to talk about that a little bit here because, I don't know, I think there might be a breaking point coming soon with the NBA, just with how big things are getting. Sort of a lack of movement that we've been seeing in the last 2 years and how that might impact things going forward. So we're going to bring Scott in, ask him a few questions, try not to get too much math involved because I know people trail off.
Math on radio and podcast is difficult to do.
That's Radio 101, right?
And that's, Scott, that's probably why Mike gave you the MBA assignment, right? He doesn't want to do all this
The
math.
former math teacher, I give him the tough one, and I deal with the easy ones. But Scott, let's dive in here. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, the cap is getting a little crazy, right? I mean, you look at the NBA cap tracker on Spot Track right now. There's one team that has cap space, right? Everybody else is under, and it's about the luxury tax. And there's certain teams that are willing to go over that because they're in the window to win, and they're making billions of dollars anyway. So who cares? But
can anybody guess that team? Anybody out there listening? Can you guess? I'll give everybody a second to guess the team. Paul's not looking at it, so I'll give you a second. Guess the team that has cap space, Paul.
Oh my God!
Most people don't even know this team is in the NBA still.
Memphis Grizzlies.
It is not the Grizz. No. Anybody else? Sacramento Kings.
Okay.
And it's a lot. It's like, right?
Yeah, they're fine, but they're terrible.
Right.
They're like the odds-on favorite to be second worst team in basketball.
They actually had an open tryout for the 12th spot on the roster. Yeah. A guy by the name of Gino Bologna won it. No, I don't know.
Good enough. But yeah, so Scott, let's dive into this because cap space is cap space. It's a soft cap in the NBA. There's and for those who don't understand that, basically that means you can go over this soft cap, but there's a luxury tax that comes into play, and if you go over that, you get fined pretty heavily. But teams have basically just said, we don't care about the cap anymore. We're gonna spend what we're gonna spend, and that's impacted a lot. So if you want to maybe talk to that a little bit and tell us where we're going with that going forward, I think that'd be a pretty interesting way to start this off here.
Yeah, a lot of the teams are using their bird rights, which allows the team to go over the cap, and the more that they spend internally, the higher the value that they spend goes up into the luxury tax. So, for example, the Oklahoma City Thunder, they're a repeater in the tax. So, in addition to their actual payroll that they're paying, they're going to pay an additional amount to the league. So, right now, we have them projected at $74 million extra that they would have to pay to the league.
Chump change,
teams
really.
Like, as you said, Sacramento Kings, they have cap space of $11 million. So what that means is they can bring in players using that space. They have to use that up first, and then they can sign over that cap threshold, which in certain teams like Philadelphia, they're just over the cap threshold. So they would sign guys with, say, a minimum salary exception, which would allow them to go over because they're just using the minimum. There's other exceptions like the biannual and that kind of stuff. A lot of those have been used up. Some haven't been, and teams save them for later. But it's all about timing. That's why a lot of these guys like Houston, they had a restricted free agent with Clint Capella. They waited and sort of played a game of chicken with him because they knew a lot of teams didn't have cap space to sign these guys outright. So they waited, and they ended up signing him back as a restricted free agent and a deal that they thought was a good value to them, but they also kept their center for the next 5 years if they decide to keep him throughout those 5 years. One thing I noticed in looking at the free agent tracker that we have, out of the top 20 teams or top 20 players that signed in free agency this year, 14 of them stayed with the team that they were already with.
That's boring. That's boring.
Yeah, but that may open up the trade deadline is always where a lot of movement happens. So you may see some of these guys that have signed lower deals. That's how they get around their cap being over it. They can. The NBA has these rules where as long as they match, they can switch. And if you're over the cap, you have a certain mathematical formula that you have to qualify with. But as Mike said, a lack of movement. I mean, even diving further, the restricted free agents where teams have their rights and they have a right to match 19 out of the top 20 restricted free agents that signed stayed with their team. And the biggest thing is there's no cap space to sign those guys, right, especially to some of the deals that they want.
Right, and I think the conversation to have here is that good for basketball? And then, based on what we track at the site, is this something that other sports should get involved with, right? Because I think we're seeing, at least in the next few years, there's going to be conversations about the other sports changing their financial structures, right? I think hockey's going to talk about it. I think baseball is going to talk about ditching this luxury tax situation because they don't want to get into an NBA system where the money gets so big that it gets sort of convoluted, which is where we are at the NBA. And then football is sort of the opposite, right? Football is on the hard cap where everything is built around free agency in the draft right now. There's really no other way to do it. The trades are there, but you're so strapped for cash in the NFL right now based on the hard cap that it's really constricted. So let's just stick to basketball here because just from a free agency standpoint, the numbers are polarizing. 3 years ago, they spent $3.6 billion. Last year was 2.4, and this year was 1.75. There's just no room to sign free agents of any note, right? You're signing your minimum.
Or are
veterans.
too many? Or are teams signing their own guys and not leaving an available pool of good players?
But yes and no. But you had Kevin Durant, LeBron James. I mean, you had tons of Chris Paul. Right. George, you had elite Hall of Famers available last year, and to Scott's point, 14 out of 20 of the major free agents went back. It's not because, well, of course, it's because the teams wanted them to stay. They're great players, but it's also because you don't have to use your cap space to sign them back. You have rights. Those rights don't qualify for actual cap space. They qualify for rights space, which is. I understand it's confusing. It's sort of a mess, and you sort of need to be a lawyer and read the CBA to understand it, but. That's just how it's working. When you look on our site, there's practical cap space on the tracker, and that's the money that you can spend to go and get X player off the street, essentially. And teams just don't care about that anymore.
Well, but you also have to be willing to pay the luxury tax, right? Because that was an astonishing thing you mentioned there, Scott, about Oklahoma City. They're going to pay the NBA $70 million for the rights to pay Westbrook and George,
that's right,
30-some-odd million each.
And just to kind of walk down that path a little more, before they traded Carmelo Anthony, that number was crazy. Scott, what was it, like $200 million?
No, it was more up in the 90s, I believe, and then once they moved him, it dropped. So, and because it's a cascading, tiered system, as they move and guys in and out, it will fluctuate quite a bit. Like Washington just traded Jody Meeks, and they dropped a significant amount of luxury tax amount that they would have to pay because they had shifted him and brought nothing back, essentially.
Scott, that's actually a good point. Something just so everybody understands, the luxury tax cap doesn't happen until the end of the year, right? So as the money goes up and down throughout the year, right.
Everything locked on the last day of the year. So
teams that are over the luxury tax now, they can make trades and make some roster moves throughout the course of the season to get themselves under. Is that common? Is that becoming more common? Are we seeing teams sort of front loading their payrolls now, getting everything they can possibly get in there now, knowing they can dump some of that in
some are taking on or don't care. For example, Houston Rockets. I mean, there's been talks of them trying to get Jimmy Butler. They're already a tax-paying team. They would enhance that amount. I don't have the exact figure, but it would enhance it quite a bit if they were to, say, bring him on. So teams like that, they don't care. They want to win right now. The owner had come out and said, we want to win. If we do this, I expect to win, especially if we're going to pay this much. If we don't win and we're taking on this much extra money that we have to pay, then it may not have been worth it. But, I mean, you look at Oklahoma City. I mean, they traded for Paul George, which allowed them to sign him to a max and keep his bird rights.
Yeah, without cap space, right.
With the whole Jimmy Butler situation right now, I mean, he's trying to play the system where trade me now to these teams that have cap space or have space that they can at least sign him. His bird rights would transfer with him from Minnesota to wherever he went. So he would have a little bit of leverage on that side. If he leaves Minnesota at the end of the year as a free agent, he can't necessarily sign a 5-year contract with a team that he gets traded to because he would lose those bird rights. So it's all about jockeying for the player, trying to manipulate the system and maybe play chicken or the team call his bluff. So I think it depends. Oklahoma City and Houston and Golden State, they're all teams that are vying to go to the championship and win. I mean, we've seen Golden State do what they've done. So I think the teams that are paying right now, they're willing to pay as long as they can get to that end goal.
Are those teams that are over the luxury tax cap right now?
Yeah. Right now, as I said, Oklahoma City, our projection has them paying $74 million right now in extra. Golden State's around 50. Toronto is about 39, and Houston is at about 15 right now. So those are the top teams that I took a look and pulled from.
So just to switch a little bit, in terms of baseball, which also has this luxury tax system, there's only one team who's over the luxury tax in 2018 right now. Similar situation.
Sacramento. Oh, no.
Similar situation. They're a team that went all in.
Dodgers.
No.
Yankees.
No. Close. Both were close, but both were very smart. Yeah, Boston. Boston's the only team in the league right now that's over. Everybody else really worked hard to get under. Really worked hard. And because it's mattered. I mean, baseball, there's been a lot of years where those teams you just mentioned, they were annual spenders on the luxury tax. And that's what I mean. I do think there's going to be a big push to get rid of it in baseball because teams just aren't. We saw what happened in free agency there. They're not paying players anymore.
Right.
They're not doing it.
Well, baseball, did they figure out that it's not worth the expense of the luxury tax for 10 extra points in batting average?
No. You got to remember. Yeah, that game is changing. It's changing. Yeah. But basketball's changing too. We've made some points here in terms of positions, and Scott and I had a discussion about this morning. The funny thing about basketball is, yes, there's like a devaluation of centers, right? We're seeing centers be basically taken out of the offense. They're really just, rim protectors at this point. Scott made the point, and I'll bring it up here. We sort of did some evaluations on how each position is being spent right now, and it's very, very close. Guards and forwards are basically identical, about $10.5 million on average. Centers are a little more still, just because you're still weeding out those older players, right? There's less of them in the league, and the ones that are here, your Kevin Loves and your DeAndre Jordans and those guys, they're still making more because they're used to making more. They've signed contracts prior to Al Horford, those kind of guys. But that's going away because it's all about just 3-point shots, right?
Yeah. Well,
I mean,
we talk so much about the quarterbacks being paid in the NFL. Yeah. Scott, it's interesting that there's one position that's now being paid in the NBA.
Yeah. Everything's down the middle, right, Scott?
Yeah. Like you said, guards and forwards are being paid relatively the same. The shift is even power forwards, where you would think a big guy down low posting up, even those guys are shooting threes And it's all about the efficiency right now. Can you shoot outside? And if you do have a big guy down low, you better make it. They don't really want, like the Rockets are a perfect example. They don't want mid-range shots at all. Yeah. I mean, in preseason, Carmelo shot a mid-range shot, and then he said, my bad, because he knows the Rockets, it's all about the three, because if you make a three, that extra point is more efficient in the long run based on the analytics that they've ran. Yes, the centers are being paid. I mean, we saw some restricted free agents that were centers, so get paid this offseason. So there may be a pendulum swing back to the inside because it's being stretched outside so much that eventually you're going to have to start going back down low, which the Suns, having drafted Ayton, and like I said, some of the restricted free agents were centers that they kept. So there might be a pendulum swing back inside, but right now, I mean, if you can shoot the three and you are efficient and you can hit your free throws after getting fouled, I mean, you're writing your ticket to a lot of money.
Yeah, there's a couple of things I think that have changed pretty quickly in the league. Number one, obviously, is the center is no longer the post up guy anymore. He's either a freak athlete who can shoot the three, right, and is also gigantic like a Durant, or he's athletic enough to be able to handle the pick and roll, which is really where this league is going. And we've seen the analytics with that. But the 17-foot jumper is gone. It's gone. Every analytic says that, and it's just really just logic math, right? The 17-foot jumper counts as much as the dunk, right?
That's correct.
So, yes. So, the percentage and it's just where Daryl Morey in Houston, like Scott brought up, he has been harping this for years. We went to a conference, a stat conference about 5 years ago now, and he was there harping on this. He was there with heat maps of basketball courts, basically showing you, you can shoot that 17-foot jumper, and there's 2 or 3 guys in the league who can make that 60% of the time. But we don't care about those guys. We're not going to get those guys because they're going to cost too much.
Go back and shoot from 40% from three, and we'll pay you more.
We'll give you 2 guys who can dunk, and 4 guys who can shoot threes, and that's how we're going to win. And that's why we talked a little bit here about Jimmy Butler joining that team, and it sounds ridiculous, but it's not ridiculous because he's just another guy who can play great defense and shoot threes. And when you've got 4 guys like that, and it's an 82-game season, right? You've got to last. This is a marathon, so it's not silly to put him with James Harden and Chris Paul because both of those guys will need breaks throughout this year, and you're going to need as much depth as possible and as many threes as possible come postseason time. And for Houston, making threes is going to be a big deal in the postseason when they missed 27 in a row last year.
Scott, the money... go ahead, Scott. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, especially if they bring him in, even if for this year only and they don't have any intentions of re-signing him.
Right.
I mean,
the window's now, right?
It goes back to the window's now. If they can bring him on, win the championship, and then cut payroll and get below the luxury tax and not be a repeater, or do it now while you can. Especially if maybe Butler goes to Houston and he really likes it. Maybe he takes a small pay cut, sort of like Durant did this year and the year before with Golden State. I mean, Paul George went to Oklahoma City and fell in love with it, and he stayed. I mean, Toronto's trying it with Kawhi Leonard. Mm-hmm. So maybe if they bring in Butler, maybe something happens. But at least the window right now, I mean, they were so close last year to taking down Golden State. You got to take your shot again.
All right, with this talk about three-pointers, and guys are available, was Kyle Korver way underpaid with the Cavaliers?
No, not in Cleveland. His days are over, I think. Don't you think, Scott?
But mm-hmm. I jokingly say this.
10 years ago, yes. I mean, he was the guy before this became a thing.
His contract's 159th in the NBA.
Yeah.
At $7.5 million.
Yeah. Yeah,
that's insane.
I threw down a stat here that 3 years ago there were 13 players who had an average salary of $20 million. There are now 42.
Yeah,
42. It's tripled. I mean, it's crazy. It's
Mike
nuts.
Conley. Yeah, Mike Conley with the Grizz. Good point guard. He's had a nice career. It's on the downside of it, right? $30 million.
There might be nothing better than being the 7th man on the roster right now.
Right.
I mean, you're making like $7.5, $8 million, and you're going to play like 25 minutes all year. It's crazy. It's crazy, the money. That's what I mean. There's going to be a breaking point eventually, and we'll maybe do a little bit deeper dive on that down the road a little bit here. But last question from a team standpoint, and then I want to switch to some gambling with this league, because that's going to be real fun coming up here. But
I do have questions.
I'm sure you do. Yeah,
dueling
I'm sure
in the NBA.
Feed the addiction.
Which why they have it in the preseason is beyond me. But anyway,
because people pay,
which is stupid.
All right.
Anyway.
Last question, Scott, and it's probably the easiest question you're going to get. How long can this Warriors team stay together? I mean, what's the short-term, long-term outlook for this team? Because I think there's probably a decent split of fans right now, right? I think there's fans who want to see this last 5 more years and fans who want to see Durant go to the Knicks, right? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see how they play this out, because if Durant does leave, do they bring Clay back? He says he wants to stay there. He's saying all the right things. I mean, I looked at the projection in 2020. Steph Curry is the only player locked down outside of another player,
a no-namer, yeah.
Evans, who has who has a club option. But if you take that away, Steph Curry technically is the only player who is locked down in 2020 right now. So they have room if you look down the line, but that could get eaten up really quick with re-signing Draymond Green, if they retain Klay Thompson. So, I mean, technically, it could blow up next year where Klay decides to leave and Durant decides to leave, and then you're stuck with Curry and Draymond Green, and then you bring back some other guys. Technically, it could blow up next year if both those guys leave.
Yeah, I think the likelihood of one of those two guys leaving next year is pretty good. Pretty good. I really think so. I just think, I mean, Klay Thompson, you talk about Kyle Korver. Klay Thompson is Kyle Korver plus Scottie Pippen.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's the best defensive player in the league and the best three-point shooter in the league, arguably. You know, his own teammate notwithstanding.
I'd take Pippen over Thompson, by the way.
Get the heck. You are crazy.
No, I'm not. I'm just old.
That's just a different era, I think. It's just a different era. I think Pippen would be terrible in this era. You got to be a lot faster than Pippen could move.
Oh.
Pippen was smooth.
Pippen's not the shooter. Klay Thompson is not by any means.
That's true.
But he had more.
He had
more
some
to his
help,
game.
Huh? Yeah, he had some help in the shooting department.
He had more to his game.
Klay Thompson's a hell of a player. You got to watch more West Coast basketball. Klay Thompson.
I watched the West Coast basketball. He stands in the corner, takes passes, and shoots threes.
Oh, you're so wrong. You got to watch more.
Okay,
you got to watch more.
I think Klay Thompson has it easy.
I think if he doesn't lug the mail, if he wants to go to like a Knicks and be the guy, I think he is one of the top 3 best players in the league.
Oh,
he's that good.
I disagree with you.
He's that good.
I think he's that good because he plays with Steph Curry and Kevin Durant.
We'll see.
What do you think, Scott? Jump in on this.
I want him to leave now, just to show you, just to prove you wrong.
Klay was good before Durant showed up.
Yeah.
Durant just enhanced it, and Durant really helped last year because I looked it up. Steph missed quite a few games because of an ankle injury and a knee injury, and he really helped solidify their push. Now, we all know that they take games off or they don't have to try as much. I mean, they were even coaching themselves at one point. But played good. I think he's going to probably want to stay. That's from the reports that I've seen. But it'll be interesting. I mean, that team in itself, I mean, they signed Cousins. He may not be back until January, February, or wherever the timeline has him at this point. But that's a guy that signed using one of their exceptions. So they were able to bring in a guy who was arguably going to on track to be an MVP candidate last year.
Yeah.
So if he comes back at even 80% of what he had, that team should be another force to be reckoned with again this year. And who knows if they sign him back again now with the math because of the rights. It'll work out slightly different, but if Durant and Thompson happen to leave and they sign him without the rights and sign him with space if they end up having space, that's a different conversation. But,
right.
I mean, as far as going back to Mike's conversation or question with when does it blow up,
Yeah.
It could be next year.
Yeah, this is a big year. This could be it, right?
This is the year after.
Yeah, this could be it for the Warriors, who, by the way, switching gears now, are 5-9 favorites to win the championship. 5-9 to start the year.
Yeah, you actually
have to pay Vegas when you win.
I got to tell you, I got a little bit of a problem with it.
The
Houston Rockets should have beaten them last year.
I was going to say the only team in their way I see is the Houston Rockets.
No, I think Boston is built very, very closely and almost as good, and they're younger. And they're fresher and they're hungrier.
Yeah, but they don't have Klay Thompson.
They're definitely hungry. That's right. You're damn right. although, if you're going to watch some basketball, Jason Tatum's going to be a guy to watch this year on that team, by the way. By the way, they get Gordon Hayward back. And by the way, Kyrie Irving is healthy.
And do they have a better coach than the Warriors?
That's arguable.
And Kyrie and Kyrie Irving's of right mind now because he realizes the Earth is not flat.
Good to know.
Breaking news.
Good to know.
He was a flat earther.
I know. I'm very aware.
I've realized that I was wrong.
I didn't even hear he said that.
Oh yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, for years in Cleveland, he believed the Earth was flat.
It doesn't matter because he can play basketball.
He's come out in the preseason and said, "No, I've reevaluated things."
Yeah, he read some books.
See, that Duke education is
exactly.
paying off well.
I think Coach K called him up and said, "I got
one semester he went to at Duke, right?"
Professor Dr. Mark Anthony Neal, whom, by the way, did you watch the Leitner thing with Duke?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
The doctor there, I went to college with him at Fredonia. Yes.
Nice.
A doctor at Duke did his undergrad at Fredonia. Mark Anthony Neal's a name. Brilliant
You're such
man.
a disappointment, Kevin.
Compared to Mark Anthony Neal, you're damn right I am.
I hear he's a round earth guy, though. So,
but Mark Anthony Neal, for sure.
Yeah.
Yes,
he's not
He's actually the one who convinced me.
That's you're on the fence. Let me tell you where I'm on the fence with, and it's betting a couple of sleeper picks this year in basketball, both championship wise and MVP wise, and I think both have some really interesting breakdowns to start the year at least. Scott, we sort of talked about this. You want to dive into one or both here and take it on here?
I mean, the obvious is LeBron. If we go MVP to start, I mean, LeBron's the favored, rightfully so. But I think it'll be
explain why, Scott, because I think you had a good way to say this
about the story of him going to Los Angeles, and they haven't been a playoff team. If he gets them to a 4 seed and they look strong, I think he gets the MVP. I mean, in the last few years when he should have or could have been the MVP based on stats and all the miles that he ran and carried those teams, maybe there was LeBron fatigue. Maybe this is a reset in the story. If he does get them into the playoffs, I could see why they have him as the odds-on favorite.
Right. Making the Lakers relevant again is valuable to the league, right? So,
correct.
So if LeBron can do anything to make them close to relevant, he's going to be the favorite. And he is the favorite. He's the 3-1 favorite to win the MVP.
Are you suggesting he may get some calls his way?
Yeah, I would think so. By the way, speaking of team building, we did a little breakdown just internally here. So all these crazy signings the Lakers have done, right? These one-year deals. All the kids are under contract, obviously, next year, right? You've got LeBron, you've got Kuzma, you've got Ingram, you've got Lonzo, okay? Those are your big four for next year. Everybody else falls off. LeBron's going to have a blank chalkboard and a piece of chalk, and he's going to be able to put together this team exactly how he wants to. And he can start in January, right, with the trade deadline.
I love how you phrased that.
He can.
He'll decide.
Yeah. Come on. I mean, let's be honest here, right? I mean, there's no wink anymore. LeBron is building this team. It's one of the reasons he's there. It's one of the reasons all these silly one-year deals were done. He sort of wants to feel it out. I think he knows he can get this team to be a 4 or 5 seed, just based on the talent he's got and obviously who he is. But yeah, he's going to be able to sort of put this thing together next year. So talk about an interesting offseason. You could have Durant going to the Knicks. You could have Klay Thompson maybe on the fence about whether to stay or to go. And then you've got LeBron, literally, GM LeBron rebuilding the Lakers on the fly next year. So yeah, he's the early MVP favorite. It's going to be a fun 2 years to see how that Lakers team sort of comes around. But Scott, what about some sleepers, MVP sleepers? Because we talked Irving, we mentioned Kawhi Leonard out in Toronto now. There's the Freak. Got to talk about the Freak, the Greek Freak, and obviously Anthony Davis.
Yeah,
Anthony Davis for sure. So where do you think all these sort of hash out, lay out, and who's your maybe 1-2 pick here?
Giannis looks good.
Yeah.
I could see him making a run for it. But they're going to have to do. I think they're going to have to do well. I mean, like Anthony Davis is the second favorite, rightfully so. The guy is a beast. It's daily fantasy. He's a go-to.
Yeah, he's your Todd Gurley.
A lock for at least 50 points a game in fantasy. But if they squeak in at the 8th seed or don't make the playoffs for some reason, I don't foresee him being a lock for MVP. I mean, a lot of the guys that you see win MVPs are on these winning teams, and if they're an 8th seed, I don't foresee it. James Harden, he's 4th, but is there going to be a James Harden fatigue or a Westbrook fatigue? I like Kyrie Irving, to be honest, and I think a super dark horse sleeper would be Donovan Mitchell. I mean, that kid looked phenomenal last year.
Mm-hmm.
He had Utah moving well, and that team is going to be another team that could be a dark horse. And I mean, they did well in the playoffs. So, I mean, Irving and Mitchell, I like a lot.
I like it. What Irving's about 20-1? 20-1 odds right now?
18-1.
Yeah.
And Mitchell's 80-1.
80-1, Donovan Mitchell. Man, that might be worth it.
I'll give you a dark horse.
Let's hear it
for MVP because I think this guy's got a lot to prove.
Mm-hmm.
He's on a new team.
Okay.
He's going to want to. I don't think he wants to be there. Right.
Okay. Does he like his coach a lot?
Well, not so sure. But I was going to say if Leonard gets his act together in Toronto, right?
Yep.
It's possible, right?
Yes.
So I mean, you were looking at dark horses for MVP.
What about
he got inserted? I don't like the trade for Toronto, frankly.
No.
I like DeRozan.
Well, I was going to say, what about the inverse conversation?
Well,
why can't DeMar DeRozan go to San Antonio under Greg Popovich with LaMarcus Aldridge and become a monster?
He could.
Why
Very
not?
well
Right?
could. Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think he's probably welcoming it more, even though he wanted to stay in Toronto.
He made some comments.
He gets to go play for Pop, right?
He's got a chip on his shoulder.
Yeah.
I mean, he's pretty ticked that he got bounced out of Toronto. Who,
right.
Should have done better last year. They were the 1 seed.
He was extremely pissed.
Yes.
I mean,
well, understandably, they were a good team. They were a real good team.
Yeah. So
and he was a star there, and he's got to go. He was a star there. He had a chance to really cement a legacy there.
That's right. That's the thing.
And you go to San Antonio, and
you had all these guys staying with their current team, like we just talked about, and an all pro, first team all pro, DeMar DeRozan gets thrown to the woods.
So either of those guys, if you're really going for dark horses,
I like it.
Those would be two guys.
Leonard or DeRozan. I like that.
Yeah,
I like it. So. It's a good conversation.
And fantasy wise, I like DeRozan better than Leonard, maybe.
I like Anthony Davis all day.
Yeah, Anthony Davis. Oh, yes, he is your Todd Gurley.
Oof,
yes.
He's a monster. He's going to put up some points this year.
Serge Ibaka is like, you got to fill out some money.
You're hurting. You're hurting if you've got Ibaka.
He's only the guy left at $5,000. Okay. Paul's like, what the hell are you guys talking about?
I don't know. That's okay. You guys are way deep in here for me, and that's quite all right.
All right, we're gonna bid Scott adieu.
Yeah.
But great stuff on the NBA cap here. It's you really got, if you're an NBA fan, you've been listening to this, but you really need to go in and dive in to see the intricacies of the cap and who controls what and the trade inflators. If guys are traded, it's just on the cap wise. It's a lot of stuff. I can see why you handed this off to Scott.
Yeah, it's a monster.
Yeah, it is a monster. So, Scott, great job. Good luck following it all season long.
Thank you.
All right. There's so much more we could have done, too, with the NBA.
We'll get back into it. There's tons to talk about.
The money in the NBA is sick.
It is.
And it's always been sick.
As much as all sports are sick money, like the NBA makes you go, this money is sick, even when you compare it to all the other ones.
The cool thing about it is you're going to have tons of in-season extensions because teams have to do this to keep their guys in house, and then the trade deadlines is just going to be wild because of the reasons we talked about. There's no cap space. You got to trade players.
Yes, right. Yeah, they've got to move them, and then. So I just wonder, what does the league do with all the luxury tax money?
It's a good question.
Does it get distributed amongst the other owners, other teams?
I've got some homework to do, I guess, huh?
Yeah.
Or
does it go into a general
the
fund?
fines, the luxury
Right,
fines?
yes.
I got some. We should have asked Scott that question. He probably knows.
It probably goes to some of it goes to a charitable thing, right?
Yeah.
The league has operations. Do they throw a better party All-Star weekend? I mean,
I'm going to find out. It's a good question because, it's not.
Adam
it's
Silver
not chump
gets his
change.
head shaven 4 times a week instead of 3.
I was going to say a day, Paul.
Well, that's
a day with a golden razor.
I mean, it's hundreds.
Actually, I like him. I think he's done a nice job as commissioner, right?
He's been great.
Yeah.
Very
progressive, very forward
He's
thinking.
out in front of it. He's out in front of almost everything he's been spot on with in terms of, the off the field stuff and a lot of he's been great. So he's been a model for the other sports to sort of follow.
Yeah.
They don't
Not
seem
to mention the
following.
globalization. No, they don't. They don't. Maybe we'll get there.
All right. Do you final thing? Do you FanDuel or DraftKings NBA
with basketball?
Yes.
I've done it a little bit sparingly in seasons past. I'm going to get into it a little bit more now. I've had a good 6 weeks in football.
Well, good for you.
Yeah. I'm going to pat myself on the shoulder. So I'm going to take some of that money and sort of piss it away on the NBA for the next month. Because, I mean, let's be honest. These guys, every team's got 3 or 4 guys that can score every night.
Correct.
You know what I mean? So it's way tougher.
You're looking for the guy who hits 50, and then you're looking for the flyer, the guy who hits 30.
Yeah, it's tough.
You need a couple of those. Yeah.
We'll bring it into conversation probably a little bit every week, I think. Don't you think?
Yes. Why not?
Yeah,
It's fun.
Keep doing it.
I found it to be fun, right?
Yeah. It's a great way to keep up with a long season.
Yes.
It's 82 games, basketball.
Well, I haven't done basketball, even football ones. I find it to be fun.
Yeah.
And just the single game ones. And then, of course, I see the guys who win the big money. I'm like, geez, why didn't I think of that?
Yeah.
Why didn't I take both kickers? What the hell's wrong with me?
Well,
because you didn't play 125 entries and hit on one of them. That's
right.
why.
That's also a fair point.
That's right.
Yeah. When I see it's got, there's a maximum of 125 entries, like, okay.
Yeah, it's
First
not
of
like
all,
these guys sat there and intelligently picked their lineup and hit on every single one of them. They picked 100 lineups, and that one happened to be the one that hit.
So maybe we should get Scott to put together 125 lineups tonight for us.
He's not doing much else this time.
Right, he's got nothing else to
NBA's
do.
all signed up.
Yeah, he's figured all the stuff out for the season. All right.
Retired math teacher. I like it. Yeah.
Hey, we'll get back into some football next week, right?
Yeah.
That makes sense, because we spend a lot of time on the NBA here.
Maybe some baseball playoffs if that gets interesting.
Yeah, we might have the World Series ready to go. So,
all right, a couple of things. Number one, go rate us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. We're on Spotify now, correct?
Spotify, yeah.
All right, so make sure you give us a nice rating there. Download the podcast too, right? I mean, you can listen live, but you can download, subscribe, all that great stuff. We'd appreciate that. And sign up for the premium section. Become a premium member of SpotTrack.com. You get extra podcasts and pictures of Mike. It's great. I'm not sure what kind of pictures.
And an ad-free experience.
Ad-free experience.
Maybe that's the most important part.
That's probably the most important part. If you do not like ads on your website, or when you're looking at articles and you're functioning fine, wow, premium section. Log in. Make sure you sign up for that ad-free experience. You get some bonus coverage there. Mm-hmm. Thanks for listening to Spot. What does that look for?
nothing. Say goodbye, Kevin.
Goodbye, Kevin.
There you go.
Hey, our 50th show next week, by the way.
Hey.
50th show.
How about that?
Come on back for that.
Love it.
Golden anniversary show.
Beautiful.
Be great. Thanks for listening to the SpotTrack.com podcast.